It's not quite Real Madrid time yet. Arsenal have a Premier League game to play up at Goodison Park. They'll be travelling there for the last ever time. The Gunners take on Everton this weekend. We're going to preview that fixture and round up the latest Arsenal news on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, happy Friday and welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Hope you're all well. Hope you've got a exciting weekend planned. Arsenal in action is always a good way to start. And I don't know how I kind of read 12:30 kickoffs, because either you win, you put in a good performance, and you kind of get it out the way, and then you're then free to enjoy the rest of your weekend, regardless of what happens in the other games. Or if you lose and play badly, it can actually start your weekend in the worst possible terms, and it can be quite difficult to move on from. It can essentially ruin your weekend. So you can look at these 12:30 kickoffs in either one of those two ways. Fingers crossed, we are, of course, with another 3 points on the board and building up some momentum, hopefully with a cleaner bill of health as well, going into that first leg against Real Madrid on Tuesday, which we are all incredibly excited about, despite the injuries, despite all the problems that we've got going on around it. If you're with us in the live chat, good morning. I nearly said good afternoon. Good morning. Welcome. Good to see you guys with us. If you're watching this back on playback or listening to it on audio, leave a like, leave a review, all that usual stuff. It really, really does help. Okay, so what are we going to do on today's podcast? Well, we're going to talk Everton Arsenal. We're going to discuss the game itself, the mentality going into the game, you know, the difficulty that we as fans are having in our own minds. And, you know, you'd hope that that doesn't sort of seep through into the changing room, because these are professionals, right? And actually to question whether they'll be focused on this game would be to question their professionalism, and you don't want to do that. But it can be difficult, even subconsciously, in these situations where you've got a game like Real Madrid coming up on the horizon. Add into the equation that a lot of those players have just watched two of their teammates go down with injuries in games leading up to Real Madrid. And both of those, well, one is definitely ruled out and the other one is a doubt in Jurriën Timber. So, you know, it's going to play a part, isn't it? It's going to make you, even subconsciously, play the game, I think, at Everton slightly differently. That's not a slight or a criticism on anyone's professionalism, but I think it's a natural thing. We'll get into that. We'll get into the ins and outs of that. We'll also discuss the starting 11. We'll predict how the game's going to go as well. There's lots and lots to get into. So without further ado, let's start. Let's start with our first topic of the day. Now, I couldn't let a Friday podcast pass without having a bit of fun with regards to Tottenham and Ange Postecoglou. Tottenham obviously beaten yesterday by Chelsea, 0-0. Chelsea always seem to get it over Tottenham. It's just one of those things. Tottenham's season has been, quite frankly, a car crash. It's been terrible. You know, there's been lots of reasons for that. I think, you know, the injuries definitely haven't helped them. If I'm going to sit here and moan about our injuries, then I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't at least make that point when discussing Tottenham. But there are bigger factors at play. You know, not good investment in terms of the players that they brought in, I don't think. They're always going to have a ceiling because of the way Daniel Levy operates, players that simply aren't good enough. But they've also got a manager that I think is simply not good enough as well. And I've been saying this from very early on in the Ange Postecoglou tenure. And I've had a lot of criticism on the radio for saying this and for saying that actually his demeanor, which everybody seemed to love at the beginning, I couldn't get my head around why. I thought at times he was being very rude. But a lot of people seemed to kind of take to that and enjoyed it and talked about his honesty, blah, blah, blah. And I would actually say now that a year down the line, people have started to realize, actually, he is a bit rude. Actually, he does talk a lot of nonsense. And actually, everything he says contributes to the pylon that he feels he's on the receiving end of every time Tottenham fail to win a football match. And that's been very often this season. Let's be honest. They're languishing down in 14th in the table. That is not acceptable for a club of Tottenham Hotspur's size. As much as we laugh at them and poke fun at them and all the rest of it, being Arsenal fans, they are too big a club to be down there. Let's be honest about the situation. But basically, last night I was out. I wasn't watching this game live. And obviously, I had the alerts coming up on my phone. I knew it was 1-0 to Chelsea. I knew that Caicedo had a goal chalked off. And then I knew that Tottenham had a goal chalked off. And when I got in a taxi to come home, I started looking at my phone and sort of reading some of the WhatsApp messages that had come through in various group chats during the night. And a friend of mine who's a Tottenham supporter that was in this particular WhatsApp group was going mad. How on earth has that goal been chalked off? Blah, 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 blah. And I thought there was this huge injustice. And then as I continued my journey home, I read reports of Ange Postecoglou cupping his ear at the Tottenham fans, which he claims was him saying to them, come on, bring more noise. Don't know about that. Only he knows really what his intention was, but it certainly didn't come across that way, given that seconds prior, they were sort of booing his decision, which led to Pape Sarr coming onto the pitch. So it felt like he was saying, you know, when they were chanting, you don't know what you're doing, it felt like he was giving it back and saying, I don't know what I'm doing. He's just scored the equaliser. Obviously, the goal didn't stand, so he was left with egg on his face. But look, he talked that down and played that down after the game. But when I got home and I watched the highlights back and I saw the incident leading up to Pape Sarr's goal, I couldn't believe there was even any debate about it. In fact, you shouldn't be debating whether or not it's a foul. It absolutely is a foul. What you should be debating is whether Pape Sarr should go into the book for making such a high challenge on Caicedo's knee. Like that, for me, is the talking point and the discussion. But anyway, I don't want to sort of go on about this for too long, but my point around Ange Postecoglou for quite some time has been he talks too much. He sets himself up for the kind of media scrutiny that he comes under. He says things that he should never say because they end up becoming rods for his own back. You know, things like, I always win in my second season, puts him under immense pressure this season to win a trophy. And when he doesn't, which he probably won't, there is going to be, you know, there is going to be so much joy taken by rival fans and people in the media in terms of wheeling that comment out and playing it. You know, we do it all the time on TalkSport too. Every time someone mentions Ange Postecoglou, our producer Jeremy hits that button, that clip. I always win in my second season, mate. Well, you're going to look really, really stupid when that starts going around at the end of the season because you're going to fail. And that's because your team's not good enough. I would not back them to get past Eintracht Frankfurt. I'd be very, very surprised if they won the Europa League. But the point is, again, it's not even just about the results. The results are bad enough. The results, being 14th in the Premier League with the Tottenham Hotspur side, that going back a year had a chance for Champions League football and gave that up because they preferred to see Arsenal fail to win the Premier League title. They preferred not to try and not to give it a go and not to take it as seriously as they should have against Man City. That just sums that football club up, unfortunately. You know, they've gone from that and that kind of display of loser mentality. Postecoglou then called them out on that. And that's kind of been the beginning of the end for him, because ever since then, with results obviously taking a bit of a nosedive and sort of other bits and pieces, and he's been, I think, at times too honest and too preoccupied by kind of how he's perceived, and he wants to take on the media. He wants to fight against the media. I think what he's done in doing that is, as I say, created a rod for his own back. And that means that when he loses, all the people that he's upset along the way, all the people that he's clashed with along the way are going to be the first ones waiting in line to stick the boot in. And this is what's happening now to Ange Postecoglou. So management for me is not just about your 11 players. It's not just about your squad even. It's not just about within what goes on within the walls and the confines of your football club. You've got to manage the media as well and the press. And Ange Postecoglou's done a shocking job of that. And so every time he fails to win a game, he is going to be put in those difficult situations. Difficult questions are going to be thrown at him because he has shown that he's willing to talk way more than any other manager. Like I was watching his press conference earlier this morning from today. And like I attend quite a lot of Mikel Arteta's ones. I haven't gone to the one today due to other commitments. But the live sections, 10 minutes tops? Ange Postecoglou's live sections are about 20 minutes because you ask him a question and he just talks and talks and talks and talks. Today he was talking about mobile phones and how mobile phones are having a negative impact on us. Listen, I don't even disagree with the point, but what the hell does that have to do with a press conference about Tottenham against Southampton? And this is my point. So he is creating a rod for his own back. He does set himself up for it. I can't believe he's still in the job, if I'm being completely honest with you. And I think, the minute they crash out of the Europa League, the noise around him is going to get even louder. The questions around him are going to become even more difficult. And I think that'll be the end for Ange Postecoglou. But look, Daniel Levy's a problem at Spurs. We've heard that for years and years and years. And I'm sort of adamant that is, a really important point when analysing why Tottenham are where they are. But other managers have done far better under the same circumstances, with the same ownership, with the same leadership, with the same chairman. So Ange Postecoglou's talking a big game, but what he's delivering is completely different. It's like promising someone a steak and, delivering like a veggie burger. Like, it's not the same thing, is it? It couldn't be further from, from what he's sort of selling in terms of what he's saying. But anyway, okay. Look, of course, we're going to get lots of comments about this. Good morning, by the way, to everyone that's joining us live at the moment. If you're listening via audio or watching this on playback, hello. Rumble says Mikel Arteta spoke about the M25 when asked about his squad depth. Mikel Arteta is not 14th in the league, sir. It's not the same thing. Big shout out to Jacob Coleshaw, the main man. Jakey from 90 Min, now of Sports Illustrated. How are you, mate? Good to see you in the live chat. And we need to have a chat. We need to get some stuff going. I know a lot of you in this comment section have regularly said, what happened to that show? What's happened to the guys? Maybe we can bring you something, a little teaser there in the not too distant future. Anyway, okay, let's move on. Let's talk Arsenal-Everton then, or Everton versus Arsenal, I should say. The Gunners travel to Goodison Park tomorrow for the very last time. David Moyes' Everton take on Arsenal at Goodison Park on Saturday at lunchtime. We talked a little bit earlier on about the lunchtime kickoffs. They can kind of make or break your weekend, can't they? But what I would say is this. I think they do impact atmosphere. And in a way, I'd rather go to Goodison Park on a Saturday at 12:30 than I'd rather than going at 5:30 on a Saturday evening or on a Sunday afternoon or whatever. So, I mean, that maybe works in our favor. The fact that it's early on Saturday gives us a bit more rest time ahead of the game against Real Madrid on Tuesday. So normally I'm not a fan of 12:30 kickoffs, but I think under these circumstances and in this case, it probably suits us and benefits us. So we go into the game and there's obviously this issue that we're kind of wrestling with in our own minds about, what do you do? How do you approach this game? We've just watched our best defender, in my opinion, our player of the season, pull up with a hamstring injury that now requires surgery in a game against Fulham in midweek. And now, naturally, that is going to add to the anxiety around the potential of losing more key players, ahead of the biggest game of our season. So, yeah, I get that. But I also don't think that Mikel Arteta can just throw this game. I don't think that he can go into this game and make wholesale changes. First of all, at least on the defensive side of things, he doesn't have the players to do that because he simply doesn't have enough bodies. He's going to have to put some players way out of position to try and make up a defense that, doesn't include those who we're looking to use against Real Madrid. What I will say is that there are a few players whom there are question marks over even from now. So, like, we know Gabriel's out, but we don't know that Timber's out, and we don't know that Ben White's out. So if there's any sort of danger or concern over those guys, they fall into the category of rest them, and I'm fine with that. But like people that, there is no real concern over that come through the Fulham game unscathed, there isn't really the scope, I don't think, to sort of leave all of those guys out. And listen, Everton have been resurgent under David Moyes. They've been a really, really good side under David Moyes. They've found their ability to score goals, which makes them a much more dangerous proposition than they had been under Sean Dyche. They're always going to have that defensive resilience. That is something that was there under Sean Dyche. You look at the number of clean sheets they kept last season, it's remarkable. But David Moyes is someone that would pick up the baton in that type of thing as well and would continue that. So defensively quite strong. Offensively, they've got more punch than they've had for years. Beto has become a real handful. I watched him in the game against Liverpool the other night. And listen, quite frankly, against Liverpool the other night, I thought they were really unlucky to lose that. Sure, Tarkowski should have been sent off. I think we touched on that on yesterday's episode. And there were some questionable refereeing decisions, but Everton gave a really good account of themselves. And listen, as the sort of the games run down in terms of those that they have left at Goodison Park, that feeling of nostalgia is going to be there. There's going to be that desperation to sign out with some big results and some big scalps. And whether Arsenal are going to win the Premier League or not, there's still a big scalp. And, David Moyes and Everton will be very, very motivated. That is the complete opposite of what you fear could come through from an Arsenal perspective, just because I'm not questioning anyone's professionalism, but how can you not be thinking about Real Madrid? As supporters, it's all we've been talking about for the last 2-3 weeks. We haven't talked about anything else. It was almost as if the Fulham and Everton games weren't happening. Now, obviously, the game is right ahead of us and right in front of us. We have to take it on and we have to do our best and we have to be professional. And we owe it to the supporters that are making the trip up to Goodison Park, because it's a hell of a long way. We owe it to them that we go out and we give a good account of ourselves. We give our all and we try our very best to close that gap on Liverpool as much as we possibly can. But it's impossible to deny that Real Madrid will be on people's minds. And that's where the difficulty comes in terms of the team selection. Let me share my screen with you guys. And I think what we'll do on this episode is we'll pick the team together. Let's try and pick the team together, because I'm really struggling with this. Look, in terms of goalkeeper, I think for me it's easy. I think you stick David Raya in goal. I'm not as big on resting goalkeepers as some people might be. Defense, this is where it gets a little bit tricky for me, because we're recording this at the time of sort of midday Friday. Mikel Arteta is due to give his press conference, I think, at 1:30. So we might have a better indication of who's available then. But even then, I expect Mikel Arteta to go, we've got one more session, the classic Mikel Arteta line. We've got one more session. We'll see what happens then. Unless he's going to deliver some seriously bad news where he rules out one of Timber or White for the game against Real Madrid. As far as I'm concerned right now, while we're recording this, it is very much up in the air. So let's try and pick a team based on the limited information that we do have. And I'll do that with the caveat of, it was recorded pre the press conference. Raya in goal, I think Saliba has to play. This is what I mean, right? People will say rest him, but you don't have any other options at centre-back right now. Kivior, for me, has to play. Because if Ben White and Timber are fit, I ain't risking both of them in this game. I think having both of them available could be the difference, actually, in terms of us being able to handle Gabriel's absence or not. I think if we could line up a defense that was made up of White at right back, Timber and Saliba at centre backs, and then Miles Lewis-Skelly, I think that gives us a fighting chance. I think if we're without Timber and we're without White, and you have to put Partey at right back, which weakens you there and weakens you in the midfield, by the way, then you have to have Saliba paired up with Kivior, and then the inexperienced still Miles Lewis-Skelly playing against the best team in the world, or the biggest club in the world, against Mbappe and Vinicius and Bellingham, and not having Gabriel or a much more competent centre-half alongside him. I think that becomes a real problem for us. So I think this is what he's got to go with. I think he's got, again, there's the option maybe to bring Tierney in. There's an option to bring Zinchenko in as well. I might be tempted, to do Zinchenko. I might be tempted just because I feel like Miles Lewis-Skelly is extra important with Ricardo Calafiori out missing. The problem is that putting Zinchenko and Kivior on the same side, it does leave you quite vulnerable, doesn't it? And that would worry me. So I've thought long and hard about this, and some have suggested that you just play Miles Lewis-Skelly. He's a young lad, he can handle it. No, not for me. Because Calafiori's out, because there's doubt over Timber, because there's doubt over White, I'm going Zinchenko to be safe. This is an example where I will say safety first is important. If Timber is definitely fit and okay, then I'd play him in this game. If he's not, then you play Partey at right back. But I hate that because it weakens us in midfield. In fact, if Partey's okay and Timber's not, then let's do it. Let's put Partey at right back. Then that means at the base of the midfield, I'm going Jorginho. I'm going Rice, assuming everything's good with him. I'm going Odegaard. I'm going Marino at centre forward. I'm going Martinelli on the left. Martinelli, and on the right, I'm starting Saka. Really important that we build Bukayo Saka, that we continue to build Bukayo Saka up. Would I play him for the entire 90? No. I think it would be a view for me to him playing kind of maybe like 60 minutes or so. I think that would make sense. But that's the team I'd pick based on what we know at the time of recording. So Raya in goal. I'd go Partey at right back in this one. I'd go Saliba, Kivior, and Zinchenko across the rest of the back line. I'd go Jorginho, Odegaard, Rice in midfield. I'd go Martinelli left, Saka right, and Mikel Merino through the middle. That's the team I would pick. David says, why not Kieran Tierney at left back? Because I think we're going to play against a side that are going to low block us. That's what Everton, I'd imagine, are going to do. And I think that it's really important that when you have Jorginho at the base of the midfield, your fullback goes in there and supports him a little bit. If he doesn't, then it means that Rice has to drop that bit deeper, and then you lose one of the bodies that you're relying on to create situations in attack, because Rice is taken out of the attacking phase and is brought back into that midfield with a bit more responsibility defensively. I think against better opposition, I'd probably play Rice and Jorginho as a double pivot. Against Everton, this is not to disrespect them because they might well bloody beat us at the weekend. But I feel like we're going to have a lot of the ball. And so I'd rather have more of those ball players. Zinchenko is far better on the ball than Kieran Tierney. Zinchenko is far more creative than Kieran Tierney. Not as good a defender, of course. But for me, he gives you something. He gives you something in terms of his ability to roam and his ability to help dictate the game. And I've seen us playing games with Jorginho and Zinchenko at times, and I felt that we've been really in control. And we want to be in control, because what we don't want this Everton game to turn into ahead of the game against Real Madrid is a real battle. We don't want that. We don't want people having to contest crazily. We don't want it to become a scrap. We don't want it to become the type of game that Everton want it to be. We want it to be our type of game. And our type of game is a game where we get on the ball, we squeeze slightly further up the pitch, we dictate the play, we move teams from left to right, and we try and unpick the lock. Everton are one of those sides that even if you dropped off ever so slightly and said, come on, then you come on to us and we're going to try and play on the transition, try and make it work for us, the fact that we are away from home and that they'll want to go out and win the game. Everton are the kind of side that will go, okay, you're not going to come forward, neither are we. Cool. Game of chess. We'll just drop off. We'll sit in our own half. You sit in yours, and we'll play out a stalemate. Don't care. We're safe. We're fine. And a draw against Arsenal would be another one of those results that equates to a kind of building block for David Moyes when he's sort of getting them ready and preparing them for the new season, their first season in their new stadium, and all the buzz that comes around that. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at on the team. I know people would disagree with it, and that's fine. Let me know what you do differently in the comments. Raya in goal for me. Partey, Saliba, Kivior, and Zinchenko across the back line. Jorginho, Odegaard, and Rice in midfield. Saka to start on the right. Martinelli on the left. And Mikel Merino through the middle. Okay, prediction time. I'm finding it really difficult if I'm talking about the team being rotated somewhat, if I'm talking about us probably avoiding taking risks over players who are doubtful, then it makes sense that I'm going to predict a draw here. I don't see Arsenal winning this one. Equally, I don't see them losing it. I think it's one of those games that you just want to get through. And I feel like Everton had a lot taken out of them as well in that Merseyside derby on Wednesday. So we can talk about Arsenal being depleted and maybe a little bit fatigued and maybe with their eye on something else. But let's not forget that Everton played a really high intensity Merseyside derby on Wednesday night. That would have been really, really draining as well. And they've had obviously less time to recover. So I think those two factors, our maybe having an eye on another game and the problems that we have in terms of our defense, and then them playing later on in the week in that type of fixture, I think those two cancel each other out. So, yeah. Look, I can see lots of you disagree. Wesbird says, not for me, Harry. Matthew says we should play the back four that we will play against Real Madrid. Yeah, but I get that because I understand what you're saying, right? You want there to be that familiarity. You want them to develop that kind of relationship and have a practice game, if you like, before they play Real Madrid. But because of the fact that Timber and White's fitness is up in the air, that means for me that you shouldn't be gambling on them. If leaving them out tomorrow gives them a fighting chance of playing on Tuesday, then you absolutely do that. Because as I say, we only cope with the Gabriel injury. We only cope with the Gabriel injury if at least one of those two, ideally both, is in the team. It's the only way we do it. So I think it's really important that you give them as best chance as possible of making Tuesday night. And if that means leaving them out completely at Goodison Park, I'm all for that. Okay, Afsar says he'd leave Saka and Martinelli out. He'd have them only as subs. David says, will the team fly directly to Madrid from Liverpool? No, we're playing Madrid at home on Tuesday, so they won't be travelling from Liverpool. The first leg, remember, is at home on Tuesday night. Okay, prediction. I said I'm predicting a draw. I'm going to go for 0-0. I think it's going to be rubbish. Really do. I think it's going to be a flat atmosphere. I think it's going to be rubbish. I think both teams are just going to want to get through it. Everton, notoriously a difficult place to go. Last time at Goodison Park, which might help the atmosphere a little bit as far as they're concerned. But yeah, I don't think they've particularly got much to play for in the Premier League. And I don't think that we want to exert ourselves beyond what's necessary to try and get the result. You're not going to get Arsenal going out there and playing with blood and thunder. Sometimes though, when we go into games like this, that's when we're at our best. Sometimes when we play with a bit of freedom, it can really work and benefit us. But look, we'll see. 0-0 draw then is my prediction for this one. Let me know yours in the live chat. And I guess the one thing I do want to just quickly expand on a little bit in terms of the debate and the point is about Bukayo Saka, because I know a lot of people won't agree with me having Bukayo Saka in the starting 11. I think he looked really, really sharp the other day. I think Arsenal have held him back. I think Arsenal have been really, really careful with him. He's had more than enough training sessions. He had 6 going into the Fulham game. That was the day before the Fulham game, so he might have had 7 by the time he played it. He's probably had another 2 or 3 since, and maybe he's going to have one today as well. It might even be 4. I think Bukayo Saka is there, and I think he's one of those people that's naturally very fit and naturally very sharp, and who doesn't take that long to get back into the swing of things. I would start him in the game, but if there's any doubt, any danger, any concern during the game, you get him off, obviously, because you've got to be protective of him to a point. But you also have to give him that exposure a little bit to make sure that he's in the best possible form and shape for the game coming up against Los Blancos on Tuesday, which I can't wait for, despite all the injuries, despite all the doom and gloom about Gabriel. It feels like we got one back and we lost another key part. I get all of that, right? I understand it, but let's enjoy it. Let's take it in. Let's live and breathe it, because it's been a long time since we've been playing Champions League ties like this. I mean, I know we lost last season to Bayern, but I remember the build up to that. I was buzzing, man. We were back in the big time. We were back at the big boys table. And although it didn't go the way we wanted, you got to make sure that you enjoy the excitement and the build up and the anticipation along the way. And so I'd urge you to do that. It's not easy because of the circumstances around this game for us at the moment. It's really difficult. I certainly felt that way yesterday. And I feel like I've woken up this morning feeling a little bit more positive and having been able to just kind of compartmentalize that in my brain and just move forward. Game to come against Everton on Saturday. Let's hope we get a positive result there. And then it is really and truly all eyes on Real Madrid. Remember, if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. If you're listening on audio, Apple or Spotify, please do leave us a review. That really, really does help. I'm going to love you and leave you. Enjoy the rest of your Fridays. Leave your predictions in the comments section below, and I will see you all on the other side. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a great day. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.